evening and welcome from the YouTube space in New York City. I'm Elaine Quijano, your host for the next hour, as we discuss women in the first 100 days of Trump. To bring you this event, we have partnered with Clover Letter, an email newsletter for girls, some of whom are seated in our audience tonight. We've gathered a panel of women from different walks of life who have different perspectives, and they've been kind enough to sit down tonight to listen to each other's views and to share their own. Over the next hour, we'll take a look at some of the issues that matter most to them and how those issues could be shaped under the current administration. But first, a look at how women have influenced the president's first weeks in office.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
Just hours after President Trump took the oath of office, millions of women gathered to send him and the world a message. They rallied against the president's past remarks on women.
I'm not nasty, like the combo of Trump and Pence being served up to me in my voting booth.
And rallied for issues that ranged from immigration and civil rights to health care, currently the focus of an intense debate nationwide. Decisions on these issues fall to the president and the team he selected. He named 4 women to his cabinet, the same number as President George W. Bush, and 3 fewer than President Obama. Inside the White House, Kellyanne Conway is a senior advisor. She's the first woman in American history to run a successful presidential campaign. Another top advisor?
Strong women are definitely here.
The president's daughter, Ivanka Trump. She's used her influence to place child care and women in the workplace on her father's agenda.
My administration wants to work with members of both parties to make child care accessible and affordable, to help ensure new parents that they have paid family leave.
First Lady Melania Trump vowed in the campaign to combat cyberbullying.
I'm committed to creating and supporting initiatives dear to my heart, which will have impact on women and children all around the world.
And in his recent address to Congress, the president made an appeal to all Americans.
From now on, America will be empowered by our aspirations, not burdened by our fears.
We have a lot to get to, and we have a great panel to do so. Starting at the top left, Jennifer Wallace is an award-winning freelance journalist and frequent contributor to the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and Washington Post. Zora Ilunga-Reid is the voice behind We the People, a podcast for people who aren't old enough to vote. Scotty Nell Hughes is a conservative commentator and the political editor at RightsAlerts.com. Amani Al-Qad'atba is the founder of MuslimGirl.com and the author of Muslim Girl, A Coming of Age. Ashley Carter is the director of coalitions for the Independent Women's Voice and at-large member, D.C. State Board of Education. Nina Mariah Donovan is a performance artist and college student who wrote the Nasty Woman poem delivered by Ashley Judd at the Women's March. Ladies, first of all, thank you all so much for being here. Let me start off with reaction to the president's revised executive order on immigration. And Amani, you have really been outspoken on this. You have called this something that's created a climate of hate towards Muslims. What are the effects, as you see it, of this kind of executive action?
Absolutely. I mean, we really can't talk about women in Trump's first 100 days in office if we don't talk about the impact that his administration is having on women of color. You know, a lot of marginalized communities are being impacted right now. Women and families are being ripped apart from their children. For Muslim women especially, we have been bearing the brunt of a lot of the hateful rhetoric that elected Trump into office in the first place. For Muslim women like myself who choose to cover our heads, we are basically like the lightning rods of all this anti-Muslim bigotry taking place right now. We're one of the most visible religious minorities in the country, and as such, we are becoming victimized by an escalation of hate crimes and a lot of harassment and much of this discriminatory behavior and attitude that is really on the rise at the moment.
So let me ask you, Ashley, what do you say to someone like Amani that sees this as a contributing factor in what she calls really a fearful climate for people like her?
Well, in today's age, we've seen the rise of terrorism across not only our nation, but across the world. And I think those who are on the right are very terrified that looking at Germany, Nice, around the country, we've seen acts of terrorism facing our country, and we don't want to, and facing our world, and we don't want to have the same things going on in the United States that have happened in other places around the world.
I'm seeing an escalation of terrorism by a lot of white men, but white men aren't getting banned from our country. So to me, it's really unfair that Muslims have to pay the price, innocent Muslims have to pay the price for the individual actions of others. And for us, at MuslimGirl.com, a year ago, when this talk about a Muslim ban first started taking place, we were compelled to, for the first time since our inception, to publish a crisis safety manual for Muslim women on our website. Literally a resource just for women how to survive, telling them safety tips like never leave your homes without your phones fully charged in case you need to record someone attacking you for evidence.
Scotty, you're shaking your head.
Well, first of all, there's no place for hate against anybody. That is here we are in America. There's no place for hate. But I do have to say, yes, that's horrible what is going on. We should never target anybody based on their faith, but you cannot ignore the recent attacks that are going against those of Jewish faith and the escalating attacks of those Trump supporters. Even this past weekend at Berkeley when it came out, the violence was against Trump supporters. A mentally handicapped boy was kidnapped in Chicago and forced to drink toilet bowl water while they were cursing at him for supposedly being a Trump supporter. There is a rise of hate crimes across all boards. It's not just against one group right now, and that is the problem we need to be discussing. It's not just one group or the other. It's actually saying hate should not exist against anybody. It should be a freedom for all, not necessarily just one side. That just continues the divide instead of saying, you did this, you did this. How about we're all experiencing a real problem right now, and it's up to all of us to have the solution.
Do you think our president needs to come out and say that, though? I mean, I think I'm not sure that I knew there was so much hate until this election. And I think it's incumbent upon the president to...
And I think that's why his speech this past week that he gave Tuesday night, I think that's why that actually did such a great job, because he spoke on issues that we all could agree on, a majority of us could agree on. He left out the polarizing issues that separate the left from the right. He talked about all Americans and putting America first, and that includes people of Jewish, Muslim, Christian, men, women, all of us making sure that we are saved and we have the ability to provide for our family. That's why that speech was such a great speech and a unifying speech that I think our country needed to hear. I'm just sad that we didn't get to focus more on it and the parts of it.
All right. Well, let me ask you about International Women's Day, because we'll be talking about certainly the other political aspects over the course of our conversation here. But International Women's Day has a theme this year of Be Bold for Change. And I wonder, Nina, let me start with you. What are some of the changes you think that we're seeing women advocate for? In your poetry, you talk about a number of issues, everything from wage inequality to street harassment. What are some of the things in your activism and as you kind of work to craft your art, your poems, that you see women beginning to stand up for that matters to you?
I feel like especially with my generation, we're so much more open-minded than the past ones. So things like, especially like queer rights, which is a huge issue that needs to be focused on, because transgender women of color are the most unprotected and the most unsecured women in America, but people, they want to kick them out of their own bathrooms and stuff like that, But I feel like a part of this movement, though, is spreading awareness of things like that, to women, even older women who are growing up. Maybe they weren't for gay rights growing up because of, the timeline of it all or their region. But I feel like this movement spreads the awareness of why everyone deserves equality,
Zora, what about you? Do you think there's something happening with your generation in particular where you're seeing women take a very active role, voicing their concerns and being willing to go ahead and march and be a lot more politically active, perhaps?
Right. I mean, I completely agree. I think feminism at its root is a very multifaceted issue. It's something that connects basically everybody's different identifiers. It's not something that we can really divide along race or class lines. And I think that's what you're seeing, this sort of new feminist movement with the Women's March and, with all of these sort of smaller marches going on around the world. You're seeing people moving away from race, moving away from religion as dividers and sort of coming together as women. And I think that's really what we need to be working on in this sort of new movement that we're seeing.
Let's go ahead and take a look back. We have a bite to play here, some highlights from the Women's March.
When we elect a possible president, we too often go home. We've elected an impossible president. We're never going home.
Are you ready to shake up the world?
We can do it if women rise up.
Continue to embrace the things that make you unique, even if it makes others uncomfortable.
I am a nasty woman.
No hate, no bigotry, no Muslim registry.
I stand here before you, unapologetically Muslim American.
We will not give up our right to safe and legal abortions,
including the fight to be recognized as individuals who know better for ourselves what is right for our bodies, better than any elected official, popular or otherwise.
We will not ask our LGBTQ families to go backwards.
We are not a fluke. This is not a singular phenomenon. We are fantastic and fabulous. And this is only the beginning.
So a number of issues discussed at the Women's March. So Amani, what happens now?
I mean, I think it's definitely incumbent upon women especially to come together to push back against, the status quo that's alienating a lot of us. To try to equate, like hatred that Trump supporters are receiving with the systemic racism in our country that Trump exploited in a way that just so adversely harms women today. I think it is really just ridiculous. And I think it really is our emancipation when we come together through the spirit of sisterhood, especially knowing that we as women are really facing a lot of the same frameworks of hostility and oppression right now. I think that will be our emancipations coming together.
Nina, it's interesting. Amani talks about sisterhood. Where does this movement, though, leave, for instance, anti-abortion activists who may oppose President Trump but did not necessarily feel welcome at the Women's March? Is there a place for them?
I mean, it is a shame to kick anyone out of an equality march, because that's, what it's about, equality and having that open mind, to everyone. So I wish, even women who don't agree with every single, maybe modern feminist ideal, I do want them to be included, because this needs to depend on, mature, calm, open conversations rather than just attacking everyone all the time, So I think it's more of maybe how you protest abortion or, how you're for it.
I think the big thing is we no longer live in a Leave It to Beaver society where we're all cookie cutters. In fact, looking at this room, I guarantee we do not agree on 100% of all things. And that's a good thing. That's called diversity. We should be celebrating it. I had a real problem with that march. I was there that day, and I had my 10-year-old son with me. And I am all for girl power. I believe that could have been a very beautiful experience, a wonderful experience. But it turned into such a hateful experience because I was listening to some of the rhetoric and then some of the signs and some of the things. I had to explain to my son what a woman was wearing on her head, and it was not a cute kitty cat knitted hat. It was other things that a 10-year-old boy should not be able to know about. And then expect him to go back to his classroom the next day and look at the girls in his class knowing that they had that body part. Not something that I wanted. It was very hard for me. The words that they were saying and they were screaming at, and because of who I am, the words that they were screaming at me. Mom, why are other women calling you those names? We were we tore each other down that day as well, all in the name of supposed love with each other. So it was okay to be, as long as you agreed with them, that was great, you got to march. But if you didn't, you were just as hated as anyone else.
Well, I would say that when they're using the words that you heard, they were quoting our president.
No,
but I'm just
right. It was 15 years ago.
But I would agree with you.
But they didn't have a hat on or have the full body part. That was not what our suffragettes fought for. That was not what they were going with.
I agree with you, and I agree with you that to be a feminist, right, to be a full feminist is to give every woman an equal voice. And women's equality, that's what feminism is. We can't pick and choose our feminists.
Unfortunately, we saw, though, during the Women's March that women who didn't believe every single thing that the sponsors of the Women's March believed in were left aside. If you did not believe in abortion, you were not allowed to march. If you were against our president, but you were conservative and believed in some of the immigration bans, then you were not allowed to march. And unfortunately, women are not a monolithic voting bloc. Women have different viewpoints and they believe in many different things. We do need to come together and have true discussions about all of these issues, because we see that there are not just women's issues. All issues are women's issues. We also talk about women as being modern feminists. And when Kellyanne Conway was asked about being a modern feminist, she was actually Twitter and the dictionary came back and trolled her.
Well, let's go ahead and play what Kellyanne Conway said about being a feminist. This was at CPAC. Take a listen.
I don't know about calling yourself a feminist. I also, for me, it's difficult for me to call myself a feminist in the classic sense because it seems to be very anti-male, and it certainly is very pro-abortion in this context. And I'm neither anti-male or pro-abortion. So there's an individual feminism, if you will, that you make your own choices. Mercedes, I look at myself as a product of my choices, not a victim of my circumstances. And that's really, to me, what conservative feminism, if you will, is all about.
Ashley, what do you want to say?
I am 100% in agreement with her. I consider myself a modern feminist as an elected official. I want to embrace all of the choices that women make, whether that's leaning in the boardroom or leaning into motherhood. I am a product of the choices that I make, not playing victim to being a woman and the outside influences around me.
Zora, I'm curious what you think as you sit here listening to all of this. What's going through your mind?
Right. Well, I think there's this big misconstruction about feminism that's been occurring recently in media and just in conversations that people have been having, which is that it's some sort of man-hating movement. It's some sort of, victimized way of looking at oneself. And I think what we really need here is sort of like going back to the real definition of feminism, which is someone who believes in equal rights and having, everybody really have equal rights. And I apologize for whatever happened at the Women's March with, both of you. And as far as I know, and I went to the one in DC, there was no one who was really prevented from marching. It was more of a, everybody was there. There were people who couldn't walk who came. There were little children who were on their dad's shoulders who came. Everybody came out. And so I didn't notice anyone who was prevented. And I think, there are these different political issues that come into feminism, pro-choice versus pro-life, that sort of thing. But fundamentally, I think we can all agree we believe in men and women having equal rights. And I think that's what this march was really about, even if it might have been misconstrued by the media and by other people.
All right, clearly we have so much to talk about.